Welcome back to the Perrett Report. Well, one of the biggest issues, I'd say it could even be a crisis for many companies, is the chronic skills shortage in this country. Tonight we have two guests to discuss different aspects of the crisis, as I just call it. Sean Urquhart is a tax partner at Nexia Accountants who can explain the advantages and some tips on hiring offshore if you can't find the people here. And Brian Wexon is CEO of Skills One Television, which airs on Foxtel, and he'll be looking at answers or how you can solve the problem locally. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Brian, I'll start with you. Just in a general sense, given that your network or your programs are all about trying to help the problem here, we've seen recently, even with the BHP, that huge profit. They've said the biggest constraint on growth is the skills shortage. It's getting bad. Now, we'll be talking about hiring offshore. But is there, just looking at that, is that the only answer? We've got a number of professions, a number of areas where you just have to go offshore. Is that the only answer, and what are we doing about it here?
Look, I don't think it's the only answer. I mean, I think with all these things, it's a common sense approach. I think that when you look at skills shortage and labour shortage, we actually don't have a labour shortage. I mean, if you look at, just one aspect of that, which is Indigenous. I mean, there are a lot of Indigenous people that aren't actually in full-time employment or in any form of employment.
Yes, in fact, that Twiggy Forest incentive has done a fraction of what it's meant to.
Well, it has, and indeed there are some really good programs working on it. I mean, I think the government currently have got a target of something like 100,000 to get 100,000 Indigenous people employed, and I think that so far they're up to about 14,000. But there are some outcomes coming from some of these programs that are taking place.
But as you say, you're talking labour shortage. Let's talk at those skills, those particular skills where the crisis is so bad, we're begging for people to come offshore. Now, you know, I can think of some of the areas where this has been going on for a decade or more. Why haven't we trained up people in those areas?
Well, I think we are, but we've got a resource.
We're damn slow.
But that's part of the problem. I agree with you. And there's been a recent report that's just come out looking at competency-based skills training. So as opposed to apprenticeships being 4 years, I mean, you don't necessarily need always 4 years to complete an apprenticeship. There's also about recognising previous training and taking that into the package. So they are looking at ways of speeding it up so that you can get these people out into the workforce quicker. That report is out, and indeed there have been various state governments are actually employing these ideas now. But of course, you've got to balance that against equality. You know, with quality comes productivity. There's no point in getting people out there that aren't fully qualified or don't have the skills because you've shortcut the training scheme. So I think productivity is an aspect that goes along with quality. But nevertheless, there are moves to do that.
Sean, just looking at, you've put out some information to help business on it, but just before we get to those tips, you talk about, I think it's 17 of the 20 of the areas designated skills that you can import from overseas have had a dramatic drop in the people we're getting. So the skill shortage is not only here, we're not even able to go offshore, we're finding it harder. Is that right?
Exactly. I mean, the skill shortage, we're looking at last quarter, September quarter, 45,000 skilled professionals looking for work, and currently it's down to 17,000. So we clearly have a skills shortage here and overseas.
And overseas. Now, why is that? Why is there that disconnect? We assume if we've said, OK, you're allowed to look offshore, then they must be there. Is everyone else going through the same problem, or do people not want to come here anymore?
Well, I would have thought it'd be a great place to come with the exchange rate like it is. With the resource boom coming back, a lot of people are being employed in that area. We've got a shortage at the moment, in particular in the last month or two with Victoria crisis, Queensland crisis. A lot of those engineers have been taken away.
OK, so engineers.
Areas.
What are the other areas? I always remember hairdressers.
Look, the number one area is actually a chef. Maybe it's Gordon Ramsay taking those that want to actually be a chef away.
Our food is better than over there.
Yes, but a chef, electrical engineers in particular, construction, tradespeople, they're the key areas that we currently have a shortage.
And we're not able to pick them up, fill the gap from offshore.
But we're trying to. Julia Gillard has said that she's trying to get 2 million people out of their situation, whether it's unemployment payments, back into the workforce without increasing the current rate of migration. So it's a bit of a balancing act trying to do that. So without increasing the level of migrants, skilled migrants coming on shore, it's going to be quite difficult to achieve that.
Well, just before we go back to Brian and talk about the broader issue on this and how we solve it, because I'm sure we can in our few minutes here, Sean, you have some tips, because I hadn't realised it is quite attractive.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Isn't it, for an employer to hire offshore? I mean, I'm not sure that I should be encouraging this, but we are talking in areas where they can't find anyone
if you can't find here in Australia, then you can try and recruit.
That's what we're saying. Don't do this at home unless you can't find anyone, as in at home.
Look, the most common visa, I believe, is a 457 business-sponsored visa. So it's a skilled person that comes on shore to work. There are tax advantages. Now, the key tax advantages, first of all, you need to be living away from home. It's deemed to be what they call living away from home allowance. Once you tick those boxes, then employers can provide tax-free allowances to their employees. They include rental costs, so reasonable rent, a food component, private schooling for the kids, holiday transport, there's discounted holiday transport, rent of household goods, relocation expenses, short-term accommodation. There is a large amount of concessions available for those people that are living away from home. They move to Australia to carry out work for a fixed term. Normally a 457 visa is up to 4 years, so there is sort of a rule of thumb 4 years, and all these benefits can be provided in the tax-free, generally tax-free.
And I'd assume a lot of companies don't know, because that's obviously a big incentive to hire offshore, to get the best, to offer them these incentives.
Oh, without a doubt, it's a huge incentive, and if we do have a skills shortage, as we do, we need to bring in overseas workers to fill that gap, and this tax incentive through the tax concession of FBT enables that.
So, Brian, what do you think as someone who's trying to solve the problem at this end? I mean, obviously, they have to do this to get them in, but...
Well, I think it's a collective responsibility, and there are some good recent examples, though. If you take the Kickstart campaign that the government introduced to encourage employers to take on apprentices. Out in Illawarra, they had a 30% unemployment of 15 to 19-year-olds. So it's high unemployment. They introduced a Kickstart campaign down there, and it was successful. They got something like 534 kids taking up apprentices with local companies. Now, why did it work? It was because the local group training organisation, the local TAFE, the local newspaper, all got behind it, and the Business Council all got behind it, but driven by one of the Labour MPs down there, which was Jenny George, and collaboratively, they spurred people on. The newspaper did a whole campaign, and every day there were stories in there about, what the parents thought about Johnny going and getting a job. And it was very good. And what this did was encourage more people and motivate, because the influencers are often grandparents and parents.
See, you do the feel-good side. Sean, back to the actual number crunching. It made me wonder, is it because obviously our skills shortage is becoming a state-based problem? We've got people heading off to the mining fields, and we've got, even within Western Australia, I'm told down south, you can't get anyone to staff a restaurant because they're all going up to the mining fields. It made me wonder, the living away from home allowance and some of those incentives, does that work interstate, or is that purely for offshore workers?
No, it does work. It works whenever you're required to leave your current place of residence and move to another location to carry out your job. So if you're moving from Victoria up to Queensland, then that's classified as a living away from home allowance as well. Generally, the rule of thumb is 2 years. Fixed term contract, 2 years, that can be classified as that. So you still have all the same concessions that an expat would have, other than mainly the private schooling for kids. That's excluded. But rental, food is included.
Well, Brian, how are we going to keep them in Sydney and Melbourne where there's no mining boom?
I slightly disagree with you. I'm not just the feel-good guy, but...
Oh, no, I was just saying it was a feel-good thing. Nothing wrong with it.
I think that one of the difficulties that we continue to hear about skill shortages, but we don't actually talk about some of the things that are actually working to resolve it. Because these actually serve as, motivators to do other things, whether it's
because it's not happening quickly enough for our businesses, is it?
But there are things happening, and I think that, just on the the migration and getting in immigrant workers. I know the government are actually looking at this. I think Minister Burke has got a review of population going on, and indeed the states have made representation. I mean, for example, West Australia has made a representation to get more migrant workers in.
Okay, well, I think there's plenty more to talk on. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Some tips for people who want to go offshore. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. I look forward to your company tomorrow night, same time, same channel, different guests. See you then.